Hey everyone, David here, and I've got some exciting news to share. I've decided to write a book, and I've entitled it Psychosocial Hazards Are Real. The book is intended to help clarify the fact that psychological safety cannot be achieved without paying attention to the psychosocial hazards people are being exposed to. Despite how much individuals might be interested in treating others with kindness, dignity, and respect, many cultures are so full of psychosocial traps that no psychological health and safety effort can ultimately succeed. But to address psychosocial hazards, you first have to know what they are, and you have to have some idea what to do to address them. Though the book won't be 100% complete until the spring of 2025, I'd like to share a unique opportunity to reserve a copy during the book presale campaign. The campaign will run from September 16th to October 18th, 2024. This will be an opportunity to get one of the first copies of the book, tickets to the book launch event, and other opportunities to learn more about psychosocial hazards. For more information, you can go to my personal LinkedIn or Facebook page, or the LinkedIn, Facebook, or webpage for ID2 Solutions. Don't miss out on this unique opportunity. Now, back to this episode of the podcast. While women and people of color face significant challenges both in and outside the safety profession, there are still some making exceptional progress despite these challenges. We'll be speaking with a history maker who is poised to lead one of America's largest safety organizations. Up next on this episode of the Psych, Health, and Safety USA podcast. From Flourish DX, this is the Psych, Health, and Safety USA podcast. As workplace mental health has become a global priority, there's a greater focus on addressing psychosocial hazards. Each week, we look at psychological safety from an occupational health and safety perspective. Let's talk psychological health and safety. Welcome to this week's Psych, Health, and Safety USA podcast. I'm your host, Dr. I. David Daniels, and I want to thank you for tuning in. Each week, we seek to increase awareness of the importance of psychological health and safety by learning from the lived experiences, research, and expertise of our guests, as well as advocating strategies to reduce harm and minimize vulnerability to psychosocial hazards in the American workplace. So based on data from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, here are the approximate percentages of safety professionals by racial group. White workers are 76.3%. Black or African American workers are 12.8%. Asian workers are 7%. Hispanic or Latino workers are 19.4%. Given that only 32.5% of safety professionals are women and 12.8% are Black or African American, the percentage of Black women in the safety profession would be a combination of these two percentages. This means that approximately 4.6% of safety professionals are Black women. This data makes it even more historic for my guest, and the fact that we are now at the position or situation in the history of our country to have someone poised to lead one of our safety organizations as a Black woman is just fantastic. And I have these kinds of conversations because there is a psychological and emotional connection to all of this. It is very difficult to be the first, the few, the only, to be in rooms sometimes when you're the only one with your life experience. But it is also an opportunity for people to see that safety is for everybody. Safety is important for everybody, and it's important that we have different voices and different views and perspectives around occupational health and safety, not only as safety managers and folks on the front lines, but it's important to have them in positions of leadership. So it is a real pleasure and honor for me to be able to have this conversation with a trailblazer, and I'm going to start this podcast like I start a lot of them, with an introduction of my guest by my guest, in this case with this question. Who is Monique Parker?
Well, Thank you so much, David. I very much appreciate the opportunity to be here. And I love this question. I get asked this question a lot of times, and I'm like, okay, am I coming out as a mother, a daughter, a niece, a granddaughter? But at the end of the day, Monique Parker is a little girl from Mississippi, down in the deep South. I now live in Charlotte, North Carolina, but my roots are very, very Southern. Sometimes you can hear it in my voice, sometimes you can't. It depends on who's around me. I have a chemical engineering degree from Tennessee Tech. Um, I've been doing EHS now 21 years. I keep up with it because my son was 3 months old when I started in the profession. So he's my gauge of when I started in the profession. I've had a wonderful opportunity to work in so many different industries. Currently in the lithium mining industry, but I've been in food, chemicals, building materials. I mean, I've just had a lot, textiles. I've been around the block a couple times, so I'm very excited about that. And the three words that I like to describe myself are driven, dedicated, and determined. And those three words really resonate with me a lot of times in almost every aspect of who I am.
Hmm. Okay. Driven, dedicated. Okay. Those are all going to be, we've got a lot of time to talk about what that means. Because it does take drive to to be in and around something that sometimes not everybody's with. I mean, people say that safety is important until they have to change their behavior a little bit to cause it to be safe for other people. So, as we get into that conversation, one more question, and this is the one I ask everyone, every single solitary person. What does psychological health and safety mean to you?
When I think about psychological health and safety, it's really about the person. We talk about occupational safety and we say, oh, it's about making people safe. But that's normally the physical person. When I look at psychological safety, that's the mental, the emotional side of people that really are the hardest to support and understand because it's the one that you can hide. I can't hide what I look like, but I can hide how I'm feeling. So when I think about psychological safety and health, it's about how do I make a connection with someone so that I can truly know who they are, what's important to them, so therefore I can ensure that piece of them is safe. So that internal piece that you don't get to see a lot of times unless someone really trusts and allows that vulnerability to come out. And so to me, that's when you're doing psychological safety, you're really taking care of the total person,
Right.
not just the person you see.
Right, right. Yeah, an interesting point that you make about the fact that people can hide how they're feeling. I think it's even more interesting that they feel like they have to. I think it's just a really interesting conversation that I'm in an organization, in a group, in a social setting, and supposedly I'm here for a reason. I'm here to contribute something, but I have to hide how I really feel. And we often get in these kind of businessy kinds of get-togethers. One example I use is what's called a pseudo participative meeting. So we all come into the room. We all know the decisions are made already anyway. I was just invited so they can say that, well, Monique was there, or David was there, or Bob was there, and they all agreed. Did they really agree, or did they just nod their head because they knew that it wasn't safe not to? I mean, one has to wonder about, and it's okay for folks to see things different. It's okay not to agree all the time. As a matter of fact, there are a lot of significant safety issues that were resolved by somebody who said, "I don't know about that. That doesn't quite seem right."
It's healthy to disagree. And once we understand that, then that also influences the psychological safety because that healthiness allows you to be more comfortable and welcomed and inviting.
Right, right. So tell me what stimulated your interest in safety as a profession? Because we talked about this a little bit before you came on. I didn't know safety was a profession. I know there because I always kind of saw it as I was kind of coming up in the fire rescue service as one of the things that we did, but not really a thing to itself. I really had no idea. And now that I've found out that it really is a profession that, and there's lots and lots of people involved in it. So how did you get interested in this safety thing?
Well, I mentioned in my intro, I'm a chemical engineer by education. And so, what the first job I wanted was to do environmental work. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know where I was going to do it, but that's what I wanted. But that didn't work out. So, I went to work in a textile factory in South Carolina. And while I was there, I was introduced to environmental health and safety. So, I wanted to do environmental. I didn't know it had these other letters connected to it. And so, being in that factory for the first time and spending 3 years there, I was able to understand and learn what safety was about. But I still didn't really appreciate it or fully understand it. But I still knew I wanted to do environmental. And randomly, a headhunter called me and said, "Hey, I hear you want to do EH&S. We've got this company. They're willing to give you a chance." I was like, "I have no experience. I'm an engineer. I've never done this." And they're like, "Yeah, you can do it." So I was like, "Let's do this." So I went and jumped in, and the amazing thing was I had the most amazing mentors. Very two long, ingrained gentlemen took me under their wings, and they taught me safety. They taught me what it was about. It wasn't just about regulations. It was about the people. It was about how those two interact, how it's not black and white, how it's gray. And I fell in love. So I was able to fuel all of me. I got the technical with the environmental, so I still got to deal with the air, waste, and water. So check off those boxes. But I'm an engineer that likes people. And I say that because I know a lot of engineers that would rather not deal with people. They'd rather look at a computer or do processes. And I like both. And so the safety fueled that people side of me where I could get to know people, engage, and just learn who they are. Because to me, that was the most important thing. Building a relationship with someone is the most meaningful thing you can do. And as a professional, I can't help you be safe if I don't know who I'm trying to help be safe. And so that's how I fell into safety. And now, 21 years later, I love it. I tell everybody it's the best combination of who I am as a person because I get to fuel all the pieces of me that people need, that technical need, and then the combination of solving a problem. I love to solve a problem, whether it's an environmental problem, a safety problem, a people problem. You know, a person has a problem. How can I help them? And so that's how safety found me. That's why I've stayed in it so long, and that's why I try to encourage so many people to explore what safety can be because it's not a I'm a safety cop. I mean, as a safety professional, we hear that so many times. But the reality of it is, I'm not a safety cop. I am a safety professional who is working with the people. And when you explain to people what that is and how that supports, it changes the perspective, it changes how you're seen. And so that's why I want to bring people into it to look at it more broadly and not all about compliance and regulations.
I so agree with the non-cop piece because unfortunately a lot of organizations have utilized discussions about safety to really be to be mean to people. You know, you can't do that because it's unsafe. I also find it really interesting how many conversations are had about safety without real safety people involved. And so you get these kind of who told you that? I mean, how did you decide that that was the thing that you should or should not do? Because often, again, you get people who have other areas of expertise. So I'm a financial wizard. I'm good with chemicals. I'm good with business. I'm good with whatever. But I'm really not, I don't really understand safety all that well. I don't understand that risk is the product of vulnerability to exposure to a hazard. People don't get that kind of stuff. So they make up all these rules and regulations. All you got to do, why? It's a safety rule. Who said that was, who? So tell me where the hazard is in the first place. Well, 15 years ago, one guy had this happen. I mean, a little quick story. Fire stations in the United States are being built on one story because a couple of people got hurt sliding down a pole 30 years ago. That's it. But, and you name it, there's all kinds of that one pops to mind because we have lots and lots of decisions that have been made because one person or two, and again, I'm not suggesting at all that wasn't significant and important, but what is the hazard? And what are people actually even exposed to that anymore? And what are we going to do about exposure to that hazard? Because you can't eliminate all of them. And yeah, it's just an interesting thing when we resort to this kind of, we got to make people be safe, and I don't believe that's our job. I don't. I don't. I don't. And another thing that you mentioned, I think is really interesting. I have also met a few engineers, and I find that it is stereotypically engineers are kind of linear, sequential thinkers that aren't really much into the people stuff. Now, I mean, they're just, and it's not that they aren't brilliant people, but the kind of whole emotional attachment part, be concerned about how people feel, that's just not really something that some are into. And that does create challenges. I mean, the organization that you're now in leadership with used to be a society of safety engineers.
Exactly.
And so what about the involvement in that organization? I have a couple other questions, but since I'm stumbling into that, how did you become involved in ASSP?
So I mentioned the two gentlemen that took me under their wing. Well, there was not an option. It was, you will be part of ASSE, which is what it was at the time. This is what we do. You're a professional. You go into it, and you're gonna be a member. And I was like, okay, yes, sir. You just do what you're told. And through that, though, I was able to find amazing communities. So, like BICE, Blacks in Safety Excellence, WISE, Women in Safety Excellence. There was a lot of different other communities that were more focused on industry that you were in, whether it was mining or oil and gas. I wasn't in any of those at the time, but I have been since. And so it was really about all of the offerings that they had. They had amazing education and opportunities, the communities, like I mentioned before, and then they were also leading edge on developing of standards. So we talk about not being about compliance, but at the same time, you need to understand, as a professional, I need to know where can I go to find the foundation of what I'm trying to implement and what that looks like, and learn from others. And so ASSP really has helped me grow professionally through that process, personally, with the networks of people that I've met and engaged with and still very good friends with. And so would I, 20 years ago, did I even know what ASSP was, or ASSE at the time? Had no clue. Would I be a member if it weren't for my boss telling me I had to? Probably not. Am I thankful he did? Most definitely, because of the profound benefit it's had for me, which is why I want to give back to the society and also give back to the profession, because there's just so much that we have to give. But if nobody knows what it is or how we do that, then we've lost.
Right, right. Yeah, I can recall, similarly kind of stumbling into some of these, broader conversations about safety. And for me, it really has been about the people that I've met. I go to these, there are a couple of things I go to in the summer that are both safety related. And I go because of the people I'm going to see. It's kind of like going for family reunion, because because we live in different parts of the country and stuff like that. I'd see him on Zoom calls. I'd see him on, on LinkedIn or Facebook, but I'm not going to see him in person unless I go to that thing. So I do. And it is rare. I used to have, a handful of things I just kind of bounce around. And now I'm kind of, if my safety community is going to be there, I generally want to be there because I feel that's my people.
Understood. And that's what last year when we were at ASSP PDC, I was told everybody, I said, this is a family reunion. I said, everybody's my cousin in here. And that's what, that's how I feel about it. It's like, you just get in and you try to figure out where you fit in. And so I think it's a great opportunity.
Right, right. And again, I've found data that's kind of all over the place. I don't think anybody really knows exactly the demographics of the safety profession. But it is like many things. It is predominantly cisgender white men. And when I say that as an observation, not a criticism at all. But over the years, these groups have started to recognize that it's going to be difficult to really address the safety concerns of people that we aren't around, that we don't understand and don't know anything about. And again, some hazards, as you know so well, there are some chemical hazards. It doesn't matter what you look like. If you get exposed to it, it's going to do this. It's going to do this.
Exactly.
It's going to burn you. It's going to, eliminate the oxygen for you, that you want to breathe. It's going to do all kinds of things. But I can make the argument that psychosocial hazards are totally and absolutely dependent on the individual. They are. Because it is about your life experience. It is about what you've seen and heard and, what you like and don't like. And it's just not a judgment to say it's good or bad. That's not the point. The point is people are affected differently when we start talking about their emotions and how they feel about. So we're getting ready to use this particular chemical for this process. And some of it's not the chemical part. It is just how I feel about how that's going to affect the environment or how much that's going to cost and all of those are legitimate discussions that sometimes get left out when, we do it this way and we've always done it this way. We made money doing it that way. Is there a different way? So talk about a little bit about what it's been like being a little bit different. I want to assume you've been very different early on, but probably a little bit different from some of the safety-related groups that you've been in.
So, it's funny because there's been so many times when I've been the only. And it's, am I the only black? Am I the only female? Am I the youngest? Because early on, I was the youngest. And when I was first in my career, I used to tell, and I was in my late 20s, I told everybody I was 40. Just because I was like, in order to get respect, they have to think I'm older because then I've lived through things, even though, because nobody took the time to get to know who I was. So it was like I have to fake who I am to get that status, and the only way I could do that was saying I was older. Which today I'm going younger now, not older. But when you're young, you go old. And so it was definitely a challenge. But that's where I had to dig into those three words: my drive, my determination. Because if it weren't for me wanting to be there, wanting to make a difference, wanting to have an impact, it would have been easy for me to retreat and sit back because when there's nobody else in the room that's like you either stand out. Well, let me not say you're going to stand out, but you either stand out in a positive way or you stand out in a negative way, meaning you sit in the corner, you don't say anything, you hold your head down, you're not making eye contact, you're speaking just to speak without anything meaningful. Those are the things that I did not want. And so I learned to really listen and really pay attention to what was going on in the room around me or in the environment around me so that when I did have something to say, it was meaningful and impactful. And I wasn't saying it just because, I'm the only safety person in the room and nobody else is going to say it. Because the only doesn't necessarily mean what I look like. It could be my profession. And a lot of times in manufacturing, you are the only safety person. And so it was about making sure that I was respected for what I brought to the table, not who I brought to the table. And that was big for me. And obviously when I was younger, I did not understand that. When I was younger, I went in like a bull in a china shop a lot of times because I didn't know any other way. I hadn't been taught how to do that any other way. And so I've learned some hard lessons along the way doing it that way, where now I try to do a very good job of making sure people understand the why that people are doing and what they're doing and what that looks like and the impact that it will have on the long term.
Right, right. Yeah, I I resemble many of those remarks as I think about my safety career. I literally stumbled into it, and it really slapped me in the face. I had my first colleague die on the job, or as related to the job. I've been on the job for about a year and a half, and I didn't know. I mean, they taught me the profession, the fire rescue profession, but nobody really talked about the safety stuff as kind of a sidebar. And when people got injured and even got killed, it was, well, there was probably something they were doing wrong. It was really on them. And as I, came to see that happen more and more and more and more, I stopped believing it, because I go like, look, all these people can't be wrong. And if a bunch of people are getting injured or killed doing the same thing, there's something wrong with the thing as much as it is the people, and it's probably more the thing. Because many of these people, I have lots of stories to tell about people that they did exactly what the culture told them to do, which is why they got killed. They They followed the unwritten rules. They, didn't want to stand out, and it cost them their life. And I found, as I became a safety professional, that I was a little bit kind of like you're going to have to do this, but then as I started recognizing people, if they don't want to, they don't have to. You really can't make them. And if you make them do this, they're going to find another thing you can't make them do. So
Yes, yes.
and so again, to your point, we have to find ways to. I sure, as a safety professional, it's not my job to make you safe. It's my job to provide information so you can decide what risks you're going to take. That's all.
And I agree. And when you come back to psychological safety, you can't find that connection until you meet the person and you know what's important to them and you know why are they there? Why is the person there doing this job? Are they there because this is what my family has always done? Because that's a very different scenario than somebody that's like, I'm doing this job because it keeps me out of trouble. Those, your reasons why are very different. And so the way that I help keep you safe has to be different because I have to meet that person where they are, not what role they're in.
I'm going to remember that one.
Do you need more psych health and safety in your life? Then head over to the FlourishDX Academy for several free on-demand e-learning courses. If you're an internal professional, follow FlourishDX on Eventbrite to register for any of our free fortnightly interactive webinars. Our flagship professional practice program is also exclusively available for internal professionals. The 12-week course blends theory, applied practice, and interaction with other professionals through live lectures and a monthly community of practice session. Find out more about all these learning opportunities or inquire about a bespoke in-house training at the FlourishDX Academy. www.45003.org. Now back to this episode.
Yeah, meet them where they are, not the role that they're in, because I think a lot of assumptions get made. You talked earlier about people who feel like they have to act like they're older so they can. There is this belief out there that tenure and competence are somehow synonymous, and they are not.
Correct.
They're not. To include those quote unquote senior members of organizations who we think know something, but how are they supposed to learn? We never told them. We never showed them, so we make these assumptions. Oh, that person, they look like they're in their 40s or 50s or 60s or whatever, so they should know what to do, but they don't. They don't. And in many cases, it's not psychologically healthy and safe enough to say that I don't really know how to do that. I don't, and they'll hop on.
That vulnerability that can't exist.
So they'll hop on a piece of equipment. The first time I drove a dump truck, I was 19 years old. I'd never driven a manual transmission vehicle ever, but I didn't want to tell anybody. So I'm grinding the gears but the question is, why would you put a 19-year-old kid in a dump truck and not make sure that he or she knows how to operate the vehicle? So literally, I don't think I took it off the work site, but I could have hit and crushed somebody, run into something. I literally had never done that before ever, but I was too afraid to say it because I don't know why I was afraid to say it, but I was, and nobody even asked. So having been in the profession for over 20 years, I'm sure you've probably seen a lot of change in terms of how we talk about safety. What's behavioral-based safety, HOP, and all this other stuff that we talk about. Where do you think the conversation around psychological health and safety will be in the next 5 or 10 years? Just guessing, where do you think it's going to be?
I honestly think it's going to be the priority. It will be the focus. Because when you think about how technology has advanced and how, not only the task, there are some tasks that are going to be the same. You're going to do them the same way as you've done 50 years ago and 50 years from now. Because there's just it's hard to believe there's a different way to do it. Although somewhere somebody's going to figure out a different way. But what I will say is I believe that in the next 5 to 10 years, psychological safety will be the focus when we talk about safety. Because will have advanced so far above physical hazards that we're going to really start understanding that, as I mentioned before, we have to figure out the personal hazard that it may exist. Because we don't know if someone came to work, they just had a fight with their spouse, they were just arguing with their kid. And I mean, and all of those things impact how they show up and where their risk tolerance is. Now, one thing I know, I am a risk taker. So, and everybody says, but you're a safety person, you can't be a risk taker. I said, that's why I'm the best safety person. Because I know the riskiest way to do almost anything. I mean, I'm just gonna find the shortest cut. That's just inherently what my brain says. But over years I've taught myself not to do that. And so that's how I psychologically have changed how I interact. Now, how do I do that for somebody else? First, I've got to understand where their tolerance is. And once I know where their tolerance is, I can help them retrain themselves in certain situations to think differently, to be differently. And to me, that's when you're being taking care of the psychological safety piece. And so I envision 10 years from now, we will be focusing on that, because we're going to finally figure out that, everybody wants to be a point 0.5 TIR, recordable incident rate or whatever, because that's world class. But the reality of it is, getting below or any lower than that, the only way you're going to do that is to start focusing on the people and not the process. And so that's why I think we're going to eventually see that transition.
Right, right. That is particularly from someone in that has and will have the kind of influence that you had. Because when I started this thing 3 years ago, I didn't think anybody in the U.S. cared about this at all. I really didn't, because I literally most of the folks that I met were from either Canada or Australia, the UK or someplace, and the conversations in the U.S. But slowly but surely, over the course of time, I started to find out, I'm not quite that smart. Some other people have picked this up, but it's just more common to talk about it now. It's more common for people to think about the fact. There is no question that the physical environment is safer now than it was 10 years ago, 50 years, 100 years ago. It just is. And a lot of it is technology related. Human beings don't have to take that kind of risk anymore. Again, back to the industry I talk a lot about. When was the last time you heard of someone dying in a tall building on fire? Period. It just rarely, if ever, happens, because of building standards, technology, that type of thing. If we could only do that in people's homes, that's a whole nother conversation. But it has gotten, the built environment is safer than it once were. And as much as people may not necessarily like the idea, when we get to autonomous vehicles that aren't operated by human beings, you're going to find vehicle collisions are going to crash. The numbers will crash. The vehicles won't, but it'll take some getting used to. But we'll find that some of those reasons why people can't drive anymore will be gone. But we're always going to have the emotional piece. Always. Always. As long as we're human, we're going to have the emotional piece. And even as we interact with AI and all that type of thing, the human has still there's some thoughts going on in the human's head. Yes. Yes. So there are probably people out there who have never heard of ASSP. Don't know what. So a little brief history lesson on what ASSP is.
So ASSP is a global organization. We have over 35,000 members. We've been in existence since 1911, it sounds astronomical that it's been that long, but we've been around since 1911. And the vision of ASSP is safety and health and well-being is an inherent right of every worker. And so, the fact that as a society we've put well-being in our vision statement says that we really want to lean on that psychological safety piece, because we understand how important and how critical it is. We are an organization that is focused on education, communities, and then also that standard development that I was talking about. Those are key pillars, if you will, of the organization and what we want to present. We welcome all into the American Society of Safety Professional, meaning, regardless of what your background is, if you have a safety degree or engineering degree or no degree, obviously it's about how do we help you level yourself up? whether it's through your network that you're building and the people that you know, whether it's through getting education and various certifications that exist. And there's a place for almost everybody within society. We have multiple ways to volunteer. Our entire board of directors are volunteers, myself included. As current senior vice president, as David mentioned before, I'll transition to president in July of 2026, which I'm very proud of. But there's so many opportunities to lean in and get work done and get things done. We are an organization that has been around for a long time, as I mentioned, since 1911. And when we talk about who's part of the organization and what that looks like, we still follow essentially the demographics of what safety professionals look like. At the end of the day, we're very predominant white male, but we're starting to see the growth and the diversity change, and that's so encouraging and inviting. And so I want to share a few statistics with you that I learned myself. Is from a perspective of leadership of the organization, I will be the 11th woman to be president of the society. So I said we've been around since 1911. So that's 114 years or so. And so by the time I become president, I will be the 11th. Just think about that for a second. In the last 8 presidents, I would be the 6th. And for the first time ever, we will have had 3 women in a row by the time I become president. So we're seeing a shift. And I know you asked me what ASSP is, but I think this is important to explain what ASSP is. We are a society that is meant for all. We want all to come, to understand, to learn, to grow, develop. And we want to do it from a global standpoint. It is not just a US centric society. And when I joined, I didn't understand that. I didn't understand our global footprint. And so it's one of the things that I think is important for us to continue to look at and grow. But it is a great opportunity to really be with like minded individuals that are pushing toward a more safety reliant society and profession.
Well, wow. I certainly didn't know that. Yeah, so many women had been in leadership of ASSP. That is, and again, as particularly organizations that started or are based here in the United States have been a little homogeneous for a long time, and much of the change has occurred has been in the last generation or so. But the point is that it happens. Because there are also some professions that have not changed. They have not, and I think therapy has helped me. I've I mean, seriously, have come to the point to where, and I'm actually okay with groups who say that they want to be homogeneous and only have certain people. I'm glad when they're, and I'm also better when they're just honest about it. If you want to tell half of the population that that isn't the place for them, that's probably okay if it's okay with that other half. I mean, the NFL is all male at the moment, but it is NFL. It is that way because that's what the rules are. That's how the game was designed. That's how now there's a conversation about flag football. And I'm not saying it's not the one is better or worse than the other, but every system is perfectly designed to be supportive of the people who designed it. It is. So it's not always this intentional, oh, we want to keep certain people out. It's that if you are not open to other voices, you're going to get the voices that you have and you're going to do the things. And then there will be certain people who won't participate. And frankly, I have something to offer, but I'm not really interested in wedging my way into places that people don't want me. I'm okay. I can go start my own thing. I got some friends too. We can go do our. It might not be like your thing, but it'll be our thing. But it is actually wonderful to hear this kind of celebration of the open kind of global idea of what ASSP is. And so again, you will become president in 2026. Do you have any like one or two things that you want to do that perhaps other people haven't as president?
Well, I mean, obviously, we all come in with this grandiose idea of, I'm going to do all these things different. And then the world takes over, and you're like, well, I don't have time to do all those things because I have to react to those other. So I'll just say 2026, just given how fast things are changing today in our world, it's hard to predict where we're going to be in 2026. And so, one of the big things that I do want to make sure is part of my legacy as president is making sure that we are an inclusive society where all feel welcome. That is one major key that's very important to me. Just because I've had that opportunity, I want to make sure everyone has that opportunity. And then I want to figure out what the landscape is at the time, because who knows where we're going to be from a regulatory perspective, from a lot of different lenses. So I just want to be ready to be able to respond and support society in the way we need to at that particular time.
Yeah, yeah, that's yeah. I was at an event recently where there were multiple leaders from multiple safety organizations. And again, this is one of those things I didn't know existed kind of in the background, but it's so wonderful to see this collaboration that goes on. People may not see it all the time, but you have these really big organizations that look like they should be competitors, and it doesn't appear that they really are. Not some areas that probably are from a business perspective, but I think there honestly are enough safety issues to go around. There's enough stuff that needs work, and it's just wonderful to see this working together, even though doing things slightly differently, but working together at the same time. I most of my safety, as a safety time as a professionally, I've been at the NSC, which is more based on organizations. And I didn't know that there was a difference, that one's about the organization, the other's about the people, but both are about safety. And I just think that's the part that you can't. As a matter of fact, I don't think you can do either without the other, because you got to have people who understand this, but you also have to have environments where those people can thrive, and you got to do them both. And I don't know that you can be excellent at both of them. So it's good to have, and then you got to have the specialists, like the folks, the AIHA type folks who are more science related. But it's just good to see all these groups sharing ideas and sharing, supporting one another. And, it's okay to be a member of all or most of them. Yeah, that's fine. I'm on the board of the Society for Total Worker Health, which is kind of agnostic. If you're interested in worker health, you can be a member over here. So it's just good to see these kinds of, opportunities for people to go and be able to learn and grow and just gather as much information as possible and take it back to a world that sometimes has really no idea what we're talking about. So I talked about psychological health and safety, where that looks. What about the profession of safety itself? So where do you see safety professionals and the profession itself, in the next, 5 or so years, if you're, just kind of taking a gander out there?
Whew. I mean, I'm struggling with this myself, because I'm of the older generation. I've come to realize, but I think AI is where the new profession is going to have to go. We're going to have to lean in and support it. I mean, I'm still trying to learn it, understand it, and figure out how to use it. But I think in the next 5 years, it will become an integral part of how a professional does their job. Now, by no means am I saying it's going to take over having to have a safety professional, but there are going to be tools and techniques that AI can support us with that will make our jobs so much more beneficial to to the people that we're there to provide guidance to. And I think that's one of the things that as a profession we need to really focus on and look at and figure out, and not be resistant to, but be open minded to learn and engage and understand. And like I said, I'm leaning in. I'm taking baby steps, because one, for me as an engineer and at just how my brain works, I need to understand the why. I need to understand, one, how it works, what it's doing, and what it's going to give me. And then I need to build trust with it. Just like I build relationships with people, I need to build trust with this tool so that I know that it's going to give me the benefit that I'm looking for. But I think AI is definitely going to be, as a professional, where safety professionals need to get a little bit more comfortable with, get more educated on, and figure out how to enhance it, how to bring it in and use it to enhance what you're doing, not take away from what you're doing.
Right. Yeah. I that sounds good to me. It really does because, again, as I was mentioning earlier, I do believe that technology, it will make the workplace, the work environment safer for the humans. I just do. There are some things that human beings should not be doing physically or emotionally. They should, and as much as I haven't seen not a single solitary war get started because people couldn't spell. It often was because they couldn't resolve conflict. So our entire educational system that spends a lot of time on things that we probably won't use is sometimes challenging to me. But the same thing occurs in the workplace. We've got human beings doing things. Well, why are humans doing that? I mean, a machine could do that much better and produce the goods and services that humans need, but the machine's not going to get injured by that. It's not going to be a risk to a machine to go into. I spent some time in the fixed nuclear, in a fixed nuclear facility, and there's some things that we did, and I was mid-20s. And we used to do these like full power entries, get in our level A suits and go in there and do, checking for, gases and all these type of things we were doing. And I think now like, wow. Now, luckily, I followed all the rules and I don't have radiation sickness or anything like that long term. But there's literally some things that technology could really help reduce the risk to human beings, and have, AI help us make some of these decisions because some of the ones that we've made have been really harmful to people, Yeah. So, well, as we wrap the conversation, again, coming into to this awesome opportunity, will this involve traveling places, do you think? Are there places that the president goes that you perhaps haven't been or would like to go?
I don't know what that looks like. I mean, obviously, I know there is travel involved. So you can look on LinkedIn and you see where our presence is a lot of times from our ASSP leadership. But we support a lot of different organizations like excuse me, AIHA. We're around, and so we're go where we're asked to go. We go where we feel like we have an opportunity to support and help guide. Do I get to go places I haven't been? Well, time will tell. I don't know. I hope so. But there's definitely some travel involved.
Sure, absolutely. Well, so as we wrap this conversation, is there anything that you'd like to share we haven't talked about? You just want to share from the perspective of a safety professional and safety leader. Just random thoughts.
I mean, I think just given my 20 years of experience in the field, when I think about the safety profession and especially looking at how we're transitioning. So our conversation started on psychological safety. I think it's important for those that have a desire or even an inkling of wanting to do more in this world is to really spend some time understanding what that means and figuring out how it incorporates and understanding the personal aspect and not leaning into the regulatory. A lot of times I see these young people coming into the profession or thinking they want to do the profession because they're like, I know how to hold people accountable to ABC lockout, tagout, reg, or whatever it is. And I really want our profession to be seen as people, to be seen as those that care about people, not those that are here to find somebody doing something wrong. Because at the end of the day, if we care about people, those things will naturally manifest themselves and you'll be able to have conversations and you'll be able to see things. And so I love what I'm doing. I love the work that I get to do in my professional job. I love the work I get to do in my volunteer role with ASSP. I love the work that I do on a personal side because I engage and support different groups that my children are in and help guide and lead through those. And so I just think it's important that when we come into such a profession of safety, And especially if we're looking at psychological, occupational, whatever the adjective we put in front of it, or the adverb, or whatever we want to call it. We talked about spelling. Spelling is not a thing. I do math, not spelling. But I think it's really important about making sure that we're doing it for the right reason, and that we're going to have an impact in how we engage with that and feel with that. And so do it because you love it. Do it because you want to make a difference and an impact. And then figure out a way, because making an impact is not a one-size-fits-all approach. We all have to play different roles in this safety atmosphere, in this safety profession, and find the one that speaks to you the most and lean in on it.
Right. Lean in. There you go. There you go. If folks want to follow up with you, they want to reach out, learn more about you, learn more about ASSP, what's a good way to do that?
Well, I can be found on LinkedIn like everybody else. Monique Parker. CSP is my name on LinkedIn. There's quite a few other Monique Parkers I know out there. But that's one way. I am on ASSP's website and our board of directors. So that is another avenue to be able to reach out and find me and engage. And then I'm sure we can find other ways to connect. But I would say LinkedIn is probably the easiest and most efficient way to connect with people.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Monique Parker, for spending some time with me. It's really an honor. I do count it an honor to be able to talk to trailblazers. I do. When you're taking a road that few people have taken or that no one has taken, it gives you opportunities that other people haven't had, because it's kind of hard to say it should be done this way or that way because they weren't you. Really. And I just think it's just but again, what's probably as or more important, two parts. One is that, you have put yourself in a position to be able to do, to fulfill a role like this, and that other people get to see it. I think they're both really, really important. And it's wonderful for those of us in the profession to be able to look at somebody like you and go like, my sister's getting it done. So, but again, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I had a wonderful time having this conversation with you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So if you're watching or listening to this podcast for the first time, welcome. I hope something that you've heard will bring you back to a future episode. Previous episodes of the podcast can be found at psychhealthandsafetyusa.com. You can watch, like, subscribe, and share the podcast on the Flourish DX YouTube page. And please do join the Psych Health and Safety USA movement by connecting and becoming a subscriber on LinkedIn. So until next time, stay tuned and look out for the next episode of the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. Tune in each week for new episodes of the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. If you have a story or know of one that needs to be told, reach out to us on LinkedIn or send an email to david@id2-solutions.com or go to the Flourish DX website at flourishdx.com. We'll see you next time.